programs are Friday night dinners. Friday night is the start of the Jewish Sabbath, which is mostly Saturday. Jewish holidays begin at sundown. So typically, we'd have Friday night dinners at a house near campus where students host programs. Also around Jewish holidays, we'll have programs, whether it's services or, depending on the holiday, sometimes there are traditional gatherings or events that go around that. And sometimes just social gatherings. We don't know exactly how many Jewish students are at UK, but we think, roughly the conventional wisdom is like roughly 250 to 300, on a campus of 30,000. So I think sometimes it's really important for students to be around people that have a similar background to them, because a lot of cases they'll be the only Jewish person in their class or in their dorm or fraternity, sorority, whatever that might be. And we do, we do aim to, we are open to students from all colleges, universities in Central Kentucky. I've met with some students at Transy a couple times, gone to Center College, been in touch with some folks from EKU. So, obviously those schools will have much, much smaller Jewish student populations, but it is something that we're here for all of those students as well. And certainly, Berea included in that. And also something we do, programmatically is we do community service, social action programming, interfaith and cross-cultural programs. So part of it, a big part of it is also kind of the outward facing and wanting to help educate and have other students know kind of more about what Judaism is and what the Jewish community is like. So I guess a little bit about how I got here. I grew up in Louisville and went to UK. Went through the experience of, being a Jewish student on a very non-Jewish campus. A lot of my friends that I met I was the first Jewish person they met, and things like that. And which for me was actually something I kind of enjoyed, being able to educate people and field those questions. I grew up with a pretty strong Jewish education and background, but it's something I recognize that, for the students I work with, is that it's certainly not a comfortable thing for everyone, especially if you're a college freshman coming onto campus. The last thing you may want is to really stand out and to be the only one of something in your group, and then to have to, field those questions. So, providing that a space for students to come together with other Jewish students, I think is an important thing, so they don't necessarily feel that. But just kind of how I got into this field in general. Like I said, I grew up in Louisville, lived there from the age of 6 or so. My family, all of my great-grandparents moved from Eastern Europe at the beginning of the 20th century. So I don't know how much about different kind of cultures of Judaism, but the Eastern European Ashkenazi Jew, that's kind of where I come from. And growing up, my mom was the senior adult director at the Jewish Community Center in Louisville for many, many years. So I kind of grew up there, and that was kind of my second home and how I connected with Judaism. And after school at UK, I had the opportunity to work for an organization called BBYO. It's a large Jewish high school organization across the country, and I worked there for about 10 years, starting in Louisville. I was in LA and New York for 4 years each, and then heard about the opportunity to come back to Kentucky and be able to start this new role and build something which was really exciting for me. And oddly enough, in terms of, so I'm just, make sure clear, I'm a lay person. I'm not a clergy or anything like that. And I even, my personal connection to Judaism isn't as much through the kind of the religious side. I kind of go back and forth and in multiple different directions in terms of what my faith is and what my beliefs are and things like that. But my my Jewish connection personally, it's much more through the history and the culture and the traditions. Just knowing and feeling really fortunate, honestly, to live in a time where it's reasonably safe to be Jewish, knowing kind of what has transpired historically, and knowing that my great grandparents all left the Pale of Settlement from the former Soviet Union because it was not safe to be Jewish there, and knowing that they came here with that hope and promise and of being able to build a better life, and I feel really, really fortunate to be an inheritor of that, and but also knowing that it's hard to be complacent and view that as permanent, I guess, looking at how things have been historically. So just wanting to make sure in whatever small way I can with the students I work with, high school students before, college students now, that they are able to connect with Judaism in a way that whatever's meaningful to them, and for them to explore what that might mean, maybe aspects of what it means to be Jewish that they hadn't considered before or hadn't really thought of, and help them learn and engage in a deeper way. And also something that I found interesting in working with college students, a good number of the students that I work with, maybe have one Jewish parent, didn't grow up in a religious Jewish household, and then in coming to college and exploring their identity, really want to decide they want to dive deeper into what that Jewish heritage is like and learn more about it. And that's also something I found really meaningful in being able to help them in that role. That's pretty much all I kind of have off the bat. I'm happy to answer any and all questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. We really appreciate you sharing. Do we have any questions for Justin?
Yeah.
I just have a question about Sabbath, because I spent some time in Israel, and there it's like everything closes down on Friday nights for the Shabbat. And so being in the US where that's definitely not the case, what are some ways that you observe the Sabbath, and how do you kind of make that a discipline for your life?
It's a really good question. So, there's certainly a range, I guess, in terms of how American Jews observe the Sabbath. You do have, more religious folks that they won't use electricity, they won't drive a car, won't do any work, won't conduct any business, anything like that. Which, certainly if you're not living in a community where there are a lot of religious folks, that can be difficult. And certainly even just looking for a job or whatever it might be, to know that sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, you can't work, that can be limiting and challenging, certainly. Oddly enough, despite working in the Jewish field for, about a dozen years now, I personally have never been particularly Sabbath observant. A lot of times through work, I would be working on Shabbat and, creating programs or, running programs and things like that for students. But I think, honestly, especially since the pandemic and the quarantine started, I've been a lot more conscious of it, mostly because every day feels exactly the same as the day before, and finding that one day a week that's different and doing something different on Friday night, it helps just kind of center and reorient myself. So the synagogue in Lexington that I'm a member of has done Zoom, Friday night Shabbat services, and I've gone to a lot of those and things like that. So, which I don't go to synagogue that regularly, except for, on the major holidays or things like that. But I found myself doing that from Zoom just to help that give the week a certain meaningful point that I can kind of orient around.
Thank you.
So also, thank you for being here, Justin. Do you see in the students you work with, would you say like most of them sort of join together and come mainly for like cultural connection and the social stimulation of having people who sort of like get their background and even like a common language that they can sort of connect with, and in my mind I might contrast that a bit to Christian religious organizations on campuses where it's not so much that it is more specifically a religious celebration because there's not a cultural or an ethnic bonding for people to share. Could you like talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I think definitely one of the things that makes Judaism more unique. So like a lot of our our Friday night dinners, for instance, we'll spend a few minutes doing, there are traditional prayers that you do before the Friday night dinner that are really short. There's a longer like Friday night service you could do that we don't really do. We'll do kind of the short prayers, and we'll try to have challah, like the traditional bread, for Friday nights, and as much as we can. Certainly not every week, but try to have some traditional Jewish foods, like whether it's matzo ball soup or certain chickens prepared a certain way and things like that. So I think honestly that the culinary piece I think is an important piece of it in terms of what helps students feel a sense of home, like that sense of connection, that that sense of belonging, I guess, that kind of aside from the more traditional religious piece. And also, because, so we're Hillel, and through my role, it's pluralistic. So we have, students from all sorts of backgrounds. Like I said, some that grew up with no Jewish or very little Jewish identity or connection, some that did grow up going to synagogue and everything in between. So also in terms of, because like prayer is traditionally, or at least a lot of it is in Hebrew and things like that, can also be challenging to find like a common point through prayer, because people come through from such differing backgrounds. So finding the things that are more of the common denominator that everyone at least have some familiarity with is also important.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So my question was about, oh, did I jump ahead of somebody? Sorry.
Yeah, just a second, Sylvia. Sean was trying to ask a question, but we couldn't hear you. So Sean, could Sylvia, could you ask your question, and Sean maybe work on your mic or something? We'll come back to you. Is that okay?
Sure. No, what I was going to ask about is the menu. What's a typical menu on a Friday night or on Saturday? And who prepares the meal?
So I'll say, like, in a hypothetical, I guess, like what you could consider the traditional Shabbat meals, like I said, is the challah, is the bread. It's like an egg bread that's really good. A lot of times chicken soup, something like that. And I would say, I guess, like I'm not a food person, so I don't cook. So like, I guess like a roasted chicken or something like that. Usually some kind of potato side. What we do, it really varies. Last year we had some students that really enjoyed cooking, so they would cook a lot. Sometimes it would be kind of those more traditional Friday night meals, but sometimes they would decide, we're going to do a pasta night, or Mexican food night, or whatever, or maybe whatever, like exams are coming up, so like we're just going to order from like a Middle Eastern restaurant and get takeout catering trays from there. So that it varies quite a bit, I guess. It's the best answer.
So in addition to that, so you all don't just go out on a Friday night at a restaurant to eat as a
No, we
group?
actually, yeah, so there's actually a house near campus where a couple of our students live, and it's owned by a member of the Jewish community, and through funding, like the students receive a subsidy to host our events. So, and we think that's also an important thing, just to give it the kind of that home communal feel, that it's, it's at the same place, the students know where it is and feel comfortable in the space. And in coming back this semester, one bonus of it is also that there's a large backyard. So the one in-person gathering we had, we were able to be outside and spaced apart, but still come together in person.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yay.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what was happening. I had to adjust some settings. So my question, Justin, you mentioned that either grandparents or great-grandparents were originally from Eastern Europe, and they were, I don't really know the full, I guess, societal context that was going on over there at the time, but it sounds similar to like Nazi Germany, I would assume. So I guess here in America, obviously it's not as bad as like Nazi Germany, but I guess my question is, have you either witnessed personally, or perhaps if you feel comfortable sharing, experience any type of like anti-Semitism? And like, I guess like my follow-up question would be like, how would you say to best combat that? Like, as someone that is not Jewish, and how to identify what is anti-Semitism?
Sure, thank you. It's a really good question. So kind of what my great grandparents experienced, like late 19th, early 20th century, in that the Pale of Settlement kind of refers to basically starting at the Baltic Sea, like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, down through Ukraine. The Eastern Poland was kind of the area where Jews were allowed to live in the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union. And they experienced we call pogroms, Pogroms, which was basically state-sanctioned violence. Like a lot of times, Jews would live in their own community or their own section of town, and whether it was soldiers, policemen, people that would kind of come through, burn, loot, occasionally kill people, that type of thing. So that's kind of it was a lot more sporadic, I guess, than the more organized destruction that the Nazis did. But honestly, here I've been pretty fortunate to not experience a lot of anti-Semitism myself. Even like at UK, being the first Jew that a lot of people met, like the worst reaction I got was like genuine ignorance, like not even hateful ignorance, just people like they just literally did not know. They just had, like, if you're from certain counties in Kentucky, there probably just are no Jews there, and so they just did not have that experience. So I really was fortunate enough not to experience much of that. Honestly, the only like kind of case I can think of was actually a high school teacher I had who, like, at one point made like an offhanded, I guess, joke about ovens regarding the Holocaust, and to me, and actually on the day of 9/11, like that it occurred, like we had his class at the end of the day, and he kind of blamed all of, out loud to the whole class, kind of blamed the attack on Israel and the U.S. relationship with Israel and all of that, which was also just pretty unnecessary and felt targeted. But yeah, it's not. I've been fortunate that it's not something I've experienced. Something, I guess, the way it kind of manifests itself can be in a lot of different ways, and there are also a lot of sometimes code words that can be used, like a lot of the old like canards about Jewish power, Jewish control of the media, like the worldwide Jewish conspiracies, like that's the type of stuff, at least I've seen a lot recently. A lot of times I've seen like the word globalist used in ways that like seems to be a pretty heavy reference to Jews. There are a lot of conspiracy theories around like George Soros, and that kind of has taken, who's a Jewish Holocaust survivor billionaire who funds a lot of left-wing causes, and like a lot of the focus on him and the conspiracies around that have taken an anti-Semitic tone. Like just everything going on with Israel is obviously very complicated, and there is a lot of anti-Semitism that comes out in that regard, like not in terms of like criticizing the actions of a government, like you can criticize the actions of any government, like that's but in terms of just delegitimization of like the entire existence of a Jewish state, or like the the attacks on just like that idea as being illegitimate or racist or whatever, like a lot of that can have anti-Semitic tropes behind it, especially like comparisons of Israel to the Nazis and things like that. Obviously, like that's a pretty, like folks doing that, it's a pretty specific reaction they're trying to get, and not a coincidence to make those comparisons. So yeah, it's one of the I guess challenging things about anti-Semitism. I guess the saying is that it's like kind of the oldest hatred or whatever, but that it kind of evolves and changes and shows up in different forms. And personally, like the way that I try to combat it, I guess in my job and the work that I do, is more just trying to educate people about what Judaism is and what the Jewish community is like, what our culture and traditions are. I think sometimes people can fall into the mistake of like, and it's important to combat and confront anti-Semitism, but I think some people, when that becomes their sole focus and all they talk about, like it prevents you from sharing what is good about Judaism and what Judaism actually is. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Those are some really good questions, and that's a really big issue, Justin. And it kind of got me thinking. So for your students that you work with at UK and Central Kentucky in general, what are the issues that are important to them as in relation to their Jewish identity? Is it Israel Palestine? Is it more here in the US and kind of some of the stuff you were talking about? What are some important social justice type issues that they're interested in?
Sure. Yeah. The students I work with, like it seems to be, it's mostly kind of domestically focused. They're definitely like really environmentally conscious, just in terms of, what, like just we in our activities, like the waste we produce and things like that. Certainly, like I think like most people, after George Floyd was murdered, like they were really compelled to action and reached out to me and raised some money and are really looking to do some. I know just like on an individual basis, a lot my students that were still in Lexington, several of them were taking part in the protests in downtown and really wanting moving into the semester, like seeing how we can partner with other organizations on campus and make a difference in that issue. So I find that's, and the core group of students I work with, it's a pretty small group, so I don't, like maybe 15 to 20 regular attendees. So I don't know how much that speaks to the broader Jewish student population, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, for that group, those are the things that they really are passionate about.
Yeah. And I was, as you were talking about, some of those issues and, Israel, Palestine and that, a lot of our students don't remember because the second Intifada was, almost 20 years ago. And I had actually just visited Israel and Palestine after that. So I kind of learned the complexities and then, both sides and just how difficult the situation was. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit about that and how you perceive it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge without a doubt. I I've grown up and still remain like a strong Zionist in terms of I believe in the existence of a Jewish state and the need for it, just given everything that has happened historically, and also I think it's really if I had to boil down the biggest challenge that I see personally is just that for both the Israelis and the Palestinians to learn about and accept each other's histories and struggles, because I think there's tends to be kind of a very insular focus on on their own struggles and challenges, which are valid, but I think validating each other's struggles and recognizing that, I think, is a missing piece. It's hard to sum up and summarize, and it's one of those there are certain policies of the Israeli government I certainly don't support, but there are also certain policies of the US government that I don't support. I think that both Israeli and Palestinian leadership have failed their peoples in a lot of ways, and just the fact that right now they're not really even speaking. There's no real dialogue. The peace agreement that was announced last week between Israel and UAE, I think is promising. I'm skeptical with anything naturally, but I think, because part of the challenge goes back to when Israel was, founded in 1948 and the land was divided up, that there was pretty much unanimity among Arab countries in rejecting Israel's existence and going to war to prevent that. So I think, and there, many of those countries are still maintain that stance. So I think, on that part, the acceptance of okay, for an Arab country to say yes, Israel exists, it's here. Now let's talk about now that we've moved past that you're here, you're a reality. Let's have conversations about how we can coexist in a more peaceful way. So I wish I could say I was optimistic overall, but I don't know. It's it's at least a hopeful development, and I hope it leads to at least just more conversation and dialogue.
Thank you. Thanks, Justin.
Justin, thank you for your presentation today. I just had a question. You mentioned George Floyd, and from my experience as an African-American woman, the Jewish people have always been allies with the struggle of Black or African-American people in this nation, in the United States. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your thoughts on perhaps the principles and practices within Judaism that have lent themselves to the history of that partnership and the ongoing partnership. I was so blessed when Barbara Streisand, created a scholarship fund for George Floyd's daughter, and so the examples go on and on about this sense of partnership and being allies. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, it is something, and I, especially in the last couple of years as social justice issues have been brought more, to the forefront. Again, I think historically, Jews were always proud of, the picture of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel walking arm in arm with Martin Luther King Jr. And that's a photo you'll see in a lot of Jewish offices and institutions. But it's something I've thought of, and I know colleagues might have thought of as well. Yes, we should be proud of that history, but also what are we doing today? Other than looking proudly at a photograph of something someone else did, what are we doing today to kind of like to ensure that solidarity and to work together with the African American community. You know, I'm not as well versed in like specific Jewish values, but I know like the idea of welcoming the stranger is something that comes very early on in Jewish tradition, and just the idea of being a stranger in a strange land, just like, and I think a lot of people interpret that in ways of like, you know, we're used to being kind of outcast, othered, you know, second-class citizens in throughout our history in countries around the world. So I think that experience should motivate us to see like, all right, you know, like I said, we're really fortunate, you know, American Jews, in terms of like, yes, there's been anti-Semitism in America, but, you know, today, you know, it's really as good as we've had it throughout our history. But like, to look and still see like, where is there inequality? Where are there people who are still being othered and still being, you know, not having their full rights and being able to access the American dream? You know, that it's our duty and our responsibility to fight for that. And I think it's been an interesting and complex question in terms of like, you know, a lot of Jews are, you know, are light skinned like me, you know, Jews with Eastern European ancestry, like are white presenting. So like, you know, even though we are a minority people and have experienced like oppression historically, like we do in this country like have white privilege, and like, what does that mean? And it's been a very, you know, interesting and, you know, difficult conversation within the Jewish community to like kind of acknowledge that and like the responsibilities that come along with that, in terms of, you know, like that we do have certain advantages here that we've never had before, but like, how do we both acknowledge that and use that to, you know, to work and help those that are not, you know, the communities that are not receiving the full benefits and equality under the law. And I think it's also something, I think it's telling that a lot of like white supremacist organizations and a lot of the conspiracy theory stuff out there, a lot of the conspiracy theories and things are designed like to divide Black people and Jewish people, and, you know, like try to engender that hate. And I think that's because, like, for white supremacists, the idea of like, you know, the Jewish community and the Black community being united and working together is terrifying for them and what their goals are. And in looking at that, I think that should inspire, that should be enough to inspire us. Like, if these people that are enemies to both of us don't want us working together, like, that's even more reason for us to do that and to be unified.
Thank you.
Is Hillel currently offering any online-based programming, Zoom stuff, or because I'm just now becoming more excited. I mean, I've been reading a bit more on Jewish mysticism, reading some Martin Buber as late, but I don't know. I want to tap into my Jewish, you know, heritage. My great-grandparents survived the Pilgrims and came to the United States, and I'm already like a Presbyterian, Quaker, Buddhist, so I feel like I should become more Jewish too.
Absolutely. So locally, honestly, like with Hillel, we're kind of figuring out the mix of in-person and online things that we want to do. Like, you know, knowing that we are on campus, like wanting to be in person together when we can, but also like not wanting to increase risk and things like that. And also like figuring out what is the appetite for online programming when online classes are already a big thing. So I'll definitely be happy to add you to our email list and keep you updated. I know Hillel International is also like, since, you know, I don't think any schools that I know of are doing in-person services for the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which are coming up mid to late September. So they're putting together some online services with some really fantastic guests and things like that. And so, yeah, I'd be happy to link in with that as well.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Justin? Justin, we appreciate you. Thanks so much for your thoughtful responses. This has been really, really informative.
I have a question.
Okay.
For people who aren't Jewish but like want to learn more about Jewish culture, what are some good, like, I don't know, I guess like non-invasive, like just respectful ways to like learn about that?
Sure. It's a really good question. I will have to think on that and look at some resource, because I know, like, kind of venturing into online thing, it's definitely a crapshoot in terms of the quality of what you're getting. I think the website myjewishlearning.com is like a pretty good standard site for that. And certainly from like the Hillel, like I said, our programs are open, inviting to everyone. We have a lot of students that are kind of just learning about Judaism. Not that we do at the moment like a ton of Jewish educational things, I guess. But yeah, I'll look into that a little bit.
Justin,
Okay,
would it be possible to kind of join in some of the virtual Hillel stuff that's going on? And Miriam, maybe we can, I can send that information out. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, anyone, I'll type my email address in the chat, and if anyone wants to, join our email list, or our Facebook group, where you can kind of be up to speed on all our in-person and virtual programs, be happy to include you in all of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Well, we have a few minutes left. We'll end, before 1, but any other questions for Justin?
And if you do think of something after, feel free to shoot me an email, and if you want to have a longer conversation, happy to schedule that, or just a quick question by email. I'm accessible in here really for all students across schools in Central Kentucky, not just UK. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really look forward to kind of building the partnership with you and Hillel and UK and everything. So this is the beginning of hopefully a fruitful relationship and partnership. So we're appreciative of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, something we say at the end of the Passover Seder dinner traditionally is next year in Jerusalem, but this year we had our Hillel Passover Seder online. So like the thing we started saying is like next year in person. So hopefully next time we'll get to meet everyone in person, right? And I'll be able to come down to Berea. So yeah.
I guess a question, maybe, I don't know, maybe you can just talk a little bit, but I know you said you did some like virtual programming, but as far as like services and such, I guess, or just in general with the Jewish community, how has COVID-19 affected the community?
Yeah, it's a good question, because like one of the things, like talking about Shabbat before, more traditional observant communities, like they don't use electricity on the Sabbath. So like the idea of having a virtual, or on major holidays. So like the idea of having a virtual service it's not possible. So it's been a crucial conversation. I grew up in the conservative movement, which is the Reform movement, is kind of the most, I guess, the most liberal in terms of like those type of laws, the Shabbat laws and things like that. Conservative movement's kind of in the middle, like, so, the synagogue I belong to, like originally, wouldn't use electronics on Shabbat and do this type of thing, but a decision it was eventually come to, like, look, it's the only option right now in terms of like being able to stay connected and to give people a Jewish experience. Like it's the only option. So I know there's been a lot of conversations like that in congregations across the country and the world. And I'm sure for a lot of the more traditionally observant folks, like it's a more non-negotiable thing. So I don't know how they've necessarily been able to manage that. But what's been interesting and that I've seen, like I've been able to participate in services for the synagogue I'm a member of here, and the one my parents belong to in Louisville, and you've had people be able to join that like were members of that congregation and moved away a few years ago and lived across state that obviously wouldn't be able to normally drop in for Friday night services that are able to do it. So it's like one of the small I guess silver linings, and it's otherwise obviously very challenging for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Just a quick follow-up question. Are you, like, if someone that isn't Jewish, are they allowed to attend the services, or is that like a very private thing?
No, it's there's definitely no, I guess it would depend on the congregation, but most of the ones that I know are really open and welcoming, especially if you reach out beforehand and say, I'd love to just sit in and learn, like whether in person or online, that they're really open to that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Kind of makes me think we could, take a virtual trip, I guess you would say, to a service at some point as as part of the CCC or something. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, we'd love to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting to the end of time. So thank you so much, Justin. Let's give you a virtual round of applause. We appreciate you, and
Thanks so much.
look forward to staying in touch. And again, if you have any follow-up questions for Justin, feel free to reach out, like you said. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank you again for having me. I really enjoyed it, and it's nice to meet all of you virtually.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next week, and we'll grow a little bit each week. So this has been great. Bye everybody. See you on campus. Maybe. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
You take care, and we'll be in touch.
It sounds great.
All right, man. See ya. Thanks, guys. Good stuff.
No problem. I thought it went pretty well for the first online spiritual seekers.
Oh, yeah. 10 people, including mostly CCC people.
Yeah.
Like 2 other students.
Yeah. Hey, I had a thought during Seekers. We could probably start promoting this more through